So we've all gotten a copy of the agenda. Thank you very much, Lorraine, for helping us out there. And I guess first on the agenda is to approve the meeting minutes of May 25th.
We noticed Lake Cam's taping tonight.
Yes, Lakecam is
It
taping.
doesn't appear anybody else's.
Anybody else think?
Nobody's making an audio recording?
Nope.
That's okay. Very good. All right, so May 25th.
Oh, 2017, specify that.
Right,
Yeah.
right, so it's been a while, but,
Yeah.
Yes.
so I saw my name in here a lot, and I did review it, and I thought whoever did the notes did a nice job.
Yep.
Captured the highlights.
Memory was
Motion to
exceptional.
approve.
So
Second.
moved, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. All right, update from Jim regarding the 2018 Green Community Annual Report.
Okay, got a handout, and I will give everybody a copy.
Thank you.
What I have is a little bit more than the results of
Thank you.
just the straight results of the report. And let me just sort of wave something at you first that's not in the handout. And so here's the report. It's, I don't know, about 15 pages long or so, and it's fairly similar to all past years. So it's the sixth annual report. And there is a review, and sure enough, through Nate, we got a couple of, can you kind of take a look at a couple of things, responded to them, reviewed those with Lorraine and Nate. And so we have revision 1, and there was nothing substantial, but actually they did review, they meaning DOER, although I think they have a consultant that probably does the review. So they definitely read it, and there were a couple of things that they picked up on that were worth responding to. So, all right, so that's the status of the report. No other problems with acceptance or anything like that. So I've got a couple of pages from the report that basically describe, how we did. The very first page, page 1, it's sort of the scorecard. It's called, it's table 2, and you can see that the columns are our baseline year 2011. A couple of in-between years were left out because we were running out of room. And 2018 was our most recent year, ended in the 1st of July. We're actually more than halfway through the next fiscal year. And the bottom, this is all in millions of BTUs, so it's all the different energy types are brought to a BTU equivalence. And the bottom line is that we were up quite a bit from 2017. 2017 was warmer, for one thing, but still ahead of our baseline year. So from just the numbers standpoint, we're doing okay. I would have liked to seen those numbers lower, but they are what they are. Now, in the next page, it's a narrative section, and I spend quite a bit of time on this because I'm trying to draw on as many of the departments as possible. I get help from Nate, I get help from Lorraine, fire chief, chief of police, and so on, to try to pinpoint, well, what were the highlights? Where did we do well? Where do we need some improvement, and so on. A couple of general comments. I talk about vehicles. Vehicle fuel consumption is gasoline and diesel. There's really nothing that can make a big dent in that. And in fact, in 2018, we took a pretty good hit in the diesel side of things. Most of the increase in diesel use came from heavy demand. I'm reading towards the top part there. on the highway department during a week of emergency tree removal and road clearing. There was a March ice storm that people still kind of talk about. And there was a timing thing where there was an unusually late delivery to the fuel depot, which, could have gone to the next year and didn't, and so on. But just a general comment here, fueling your vehicles runs a close second to buildings as the overall energy usage in the town. We've got a fairly steadily expanding residential footprint, and it's really difficult to reduce or even hold steady. Nate, you've actually said this well. It's sort of a hard, steadily increasing, relatively large chunk of energy that there's really nothing that we can do with grants and things like that.
Yep.
So we're always, that's going to be something that, in order to continue to show gains, we're going to have to, work even harder, if you will, in some of the other areas, okay?
It's important to note too, is as the town's adopting more roadways, that's gonna use more fuel in plowing and maintenance and all of these other things. So, you're constantly trying to combat that. And the energy efficiency, as far as vehicles go, highway, police, and fire are exempt.
They're exempt from that.
They're
yeah,
exempt,
yeah.
so.
Well, that's what I meant by the steadily expanding residential footprint. It's
Exactly.
just growing. In the schools, there's a steadily increasing need for out-of-district transportation. And that, again, adds to, and I'll show you a table at the, just to give you some sense of which departments contribute most to the consumption of fuel.
Jim, quick question for you.
Sure.
In the category of street and traffic lights, street lights, I understand. Do we pay for the energy use of traffic lights?
Where did you see?
Fourth line down.
Yeah,
I would think that would all
I-
be state stuff.
no, I don't think so. I mean, it comes off of, it's.
The streetlights,
It's
I-
powered from,
Right, I think the confusion might be the traffic lights. I think
Yeah.
it probably would stop at streetlights.
That's, okay.
Right.
That's what I figured.
likely.
street and traffic lights is the name of that category.
Okay,
Yes, it's the
gotcha.
name
It's
of
a
the
previous
category.
okay.
There aren't,
Okay.
there probably isn't a charge to us for the traffic lights.
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah,
I say that
Yeah.
reluctantly. There shouldn't be.
yeah.
It would be infinitesimally small.
It wouldn't be very much, yeah. So, we did experience a 9% overall increase in energy usage in the building category. That's all the buildings. A major portion of that was really due to the higher heating demand at Assawamsett, which was kind of a mystery. I don't know if there's a certain timing thing in terms of a delivery there. I was unable to tease that out and find that there was, so I didn't put it in here. Well, I'm sorry, there was a late-in-year delivery, but I don't know, I kind of stretched that a little bit. It wasn't as late as it could have been, and so on. And we did have around 6% higher heating degree days, which contribute to it. I made a comment, we're eager to see next year's results, which really didn't start to take effect until really the beginning of this fiscal year. You walked me through that, Nate, and really the bright spot at Assawamsett, we continue to see a steady reduction in electrical demand. That's a very bright.
Do we know if that's because they've switched to LEDs, or is that because they've changed their habits of how they turn lights on and off?
I would say it's both. I mean, they switched to LED. I don't know how to break it out.
Right.
Okay. I know in discussions with them, there's been, an effort to, do the change in habits. I think for a while we worked on the occupancy sensors.
Yeah, when we get into the second portion,
Okay.
the handout actually shows the breakdown of energy reduction based on the lighting scope that we just completed at Assawamsett. And what Jim's referring to is early indicators show about a 20 to 25% reduction in usage as a month. This, say December versus last December.
Yeah, and I haven't even frankly taken a close look at that.
Yeah.
I was hoping to get, I mean, if we probably should have scheduled this like another 2 weeks later, because then I would have had the deliveries for Q3, which is a the best sort of comparative quarter. All right, so that's kind of a narrative to capture some of the highlights. And I don't want to drag us on too much, but let me continue to walk people through. It's been a while since we've talked, and I thought it would be helpful. So page 3, not going to go through all the details, but I think it's important to continue to remind ourselves where the energy consumer is coming from. And this is a dollarized bar chart. It's not by actual energy consumption, but I think it's helpful to look at dollars every once in a while. So the regional school district campus is by far the biggest cost
I'll say.
to the town. Now, it's not part of, I think, again, just as a reminder, it's not part of us as a town, as a green community. It's outside that, okay? Pontiac High School by itself for oil is the second one. So the campus for electrical, Pontiac High School for oil. Then we go in, and the gasoline charge is the third bar. The Austin Grays, Flims, then the Aswampset Elementary School. So that just gives you a sense of why we have discussions pretty regularly about how can we get in and try to make some improvements at the high school, because that's where some, the biggest bang for the buck would be for the town. All right. And there's some more detail there if you want to look at fuel units. And by the way, this, I should be a little bit careful, this was up through 2017, so this does not include, this is not a 2018 look.
Doesn't include last year, which was a tough year.
Right. Okay. Some additional looks at cost. If you look at the total town energy costs that include Assawampset but not the campus, in other words, these are the costs that are associated with us as we evaluate ourselves as a green community. You can see there've been some ups and downs. We're sort of about, in terms of cost, where we were back at the baseline. Again, how we get measured is not in cost, it's in energy consumption, but it's helpful to see that. And I would argue that some of that obviously is affected by price per gallon, price per kilowatt hour. And at the campus, when we first started, and you look at those numbers, it was almost $1 million, $900,000 cost of the campus. Now, that's the whole campus. It's not the Lakeville part. Lakeville part is, round numbers, 60% or something like that. But again, just looking at it as an energy consumer and a cost. So that's been able to come down largely because of electrical reduction.
And these are real dollars, not converted to 2018 dollars.
No, I haven't done any, exactly.
No conversions.
So there would be, some inflationary effect in there and so on. But
Well, actually,
Not much, really.
you expect that the price is probably going up year by year, so even though the real cost is coming down.
not electrical. Electrical back at the baseline was around 15 cents a kilowatt hour. It came down to close to 10. And now it's creeping back up to 12 and a half. Yeah, that was a big part of
I
it.
think it's excuse me, it's important to recognize the fact that to try to make a judgment call on anything related to cost, dollars, on an energy side,
Grasping
doesn't
straws.
matter, because that's all driven by something totally out of our control.
Yeah.
Sure.
As long as we're maintaining or a good report card with respect to BTUs,
Right.
then I think we
I got it.
we can be good, feel good about the fact that we're
I could.
Understand
I got it, but we don't pay BTUs out of our wallet, we pay dollars.
Yeah.
So we at least want to look at dollars and understand it, so when someone comes along and asks a question, you have an answer.
And that's why I've tried to, and in fact, the database that we're provided, this so-called MEI database where all this goes in and these BTU calculations comes out, that carries dollars also. And I agree with Don. I mean, when we sit down with a different group, they're thinking dollars, so we want to talk dollars.
That next chart is unbelievable.
Page 5 is a nice story. I've got through 2018. We start off the year before the baseline year, actually 2010. The plot is not the cost plot, because it would be even steeper coming down.
It's real consumption.
That's actual consumption. So,
Yeah, that's impressive.
yeah, I mean, I got.
Like straight lines.
We've got to give credit, I think, really well to Nate and his work, working with the DOER, getting these grants. That's a time consumer.
Yep.
And I expect to see probably another round where we come down even some more. So, there we have a school in our control, and we were able to apply dollars and work against that. And it's really a good story there.
Yep.
Have we've gone from 450,000 to just a shade, looks like a shade over 300,000?
Yeah, I think the table actually has the number, so just a shade over 300, yeah. Yeah.
That's a 50% reduction.
Now, there's a lot of variables that, back in the early days, before we transferred the kids to the grade school, we had 750 kids at Assawampset. That's less than 500 now. Now,
So there's
granted,
the answer
I'm
is
not
get rid of
saying the
kids.
lights go away, but the transfer of the students had somewhat of an effect. Sure. Maybe.
Good point. No.
Because the classrooms were more occupied, there's emptier classrooms. But having said that, the lights are still on in the Assawampset every day. But this is a fabulous story that when you change the lights and the motors, the electricity comes down dramatically.
Right.
Now, the
Dramatically.
argument that you could pose an argument against that if you knew when the motors and the lights were installed, you'd expect to see a jog down, and we don't see that. We see an almost linear
Yep.
decline.
No, you're right.
And that suggests something else,
Yeah.
but what, we don't know.
Right. One in the right direction.
Right.
No,
I
I'm
agree.
not arguing with success,
I
I'm
agree
just
with you.
analyzing the
Yeah.
straight line.
And it's funny, you get into this, and there's so many things you could want to dig into some more, and I'm sort of trying to hit the highlights.
No, you're right.
I'm a big proponent of looking at degree days, and so it's not too hard to get the data, and you can see this is just for Q3, and that's why it's called How Cold Was the Winter Really? And we had 14 and 15 were cold winters. In fact, 2015, I have to go back around 30 years to find a Q3 that cold, which is interesting in these days of global warming, I guess, And then it dropped off quite a bit. 2016 was our good year. In terms of overall energy consumption, it was kind of the year that got us to the 20% reduction. So it fell in a good time. And then we've come up just a little bit. So the last couple of years have slowly increased back to kind of a baseline, really. Okay. So that's a view with heating degree days. Another way to look at it, this is kind of a fun one. The biggest consumer of energy is the Pontiac Regional High School as a building consumption of oil. I mean, it's just, they go through 30,000 gallons a month, and some big month it's like, oh my God, it's hard to even conceptualize that. But I may have overstated that a little bit, but it's close. So, I mean, you can just take a look. In 2015, 89,000 gallons of oil. That's for the year. All right.
Is this number 2 or number 6, do you know?
Say that again now.
It should be 2, I would think. I don't know that we have any preheating
I would
systems.
bet on number 2.
Oh, yeah.
I would think 2.
And one of the problems is that the boilers were designed to burn 6, or burn just about anything, I think. And so they're not very efficient and so on, so.
Well, that's a classic excuse for replacing the boiler. I mean, that's what Old Colony did, and we saved more money than, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
At Stoughton High, because I've been retired for quite a while now, but we had a boiler that used number 2, and the only thing it did was heat the 6 to get it flowing enough to be able to be burned. I mean, we got rid of that so long ago. Think of the energy cost
Yeah.
involved with that system.
Yeah. So, but it's interesting because, so the plot really, in green is looking at the degree days. I don't know why I switched it there, but so it's degree days, and in blue on the plot now is oil usage. So, and it's on a delta percent basis. But it kind of suggests when you get cold weather, you're going to accelerate your oil usage, and when it's warmer, you're going to have low oil usage years like 2012 and 2016. I mean, they're down by 40%. And I think I've got the baseline year, as the basis. Yeah. So weather has an effect. Okay, we're getting there. Page 8. There's no need to go through all the data, but I pulled this out because, again, it's looking at the campus, and I'm focusing at two buildings. First of all, the high school for oil consumption, which we just talked about. It's a big consumer. But if you look at electrical consumption, the FLIMS, the middle school stands out. So I did an analysis that said, what if I sort of looked at average consumption per square foot, and I said, what if we could get the two outlying buildings to about the mean of the three other buildings, including Assawamsett, for consumption of fuel and electrical per square foot. Everybody following me there? If you did that, if we were able to do that, in the lower left of the very two bottom tables, kind of made a little matrix. What would the savings be in the oil in the case of Assawamsett, of Apponequet, and electrical in the case of the middle school? And I looked at sort of four scenarios. Two variables: the cost per gallon or the cost per kilowatt hour, and then whether you had a cold or a moderate winter. Does it all still hold together? So just looking at the oil side, it suggests with the high cost of oil, and we had been up as high as 320, not there now, but and a cold winter. So those two combinations, which is what hit us 2015. I don't even have the dollars. Oh, I should have put the dollars here. I mean, we spent big bucks in oil at the high school that year.
The cold year.
Yeah, because of the price of oil was up also. So there was a potential savings of, 85,000. Okay. If you look at the electrical side, again, the different school, the potential under cold winter, the winter doesn't have the temperature doesn't have that much impact, but high cost per kilowatt hour, there was in the 35 to 40,000 dollar savings. Nate, I compared this number for the high school with the study that we got, the ASRE Level 2 study, and it's kind of right in the ballpark of what they were saying you would get by a boiler replacement. Or maybe, I can't, whether it was just a boiler replacement.
there was a boiler.
Or it was, there was that. I can't remember whether it was just a boiler replacement or the whole deal. But it was in the same ballpark. So I was happy to see that when I went through those numbers. It wasn't something that was an order of magnitude off.
Yeah.
Okay. So just a little working with the numbers to see what the potential was for savings. That's all kind of dollars. And then the final, sorry for all these charts and tables and everything, guys, but so this is looking at gasoline usage and diesel usage. It's broken down first half and second half. I don't really do a whole lot with the first and second half. That's how the data comes to me. But if you take a look at on the upper part, the gasoline, I've highlighted, where's the big consumption coming from? Well, 10,723 gallons for police, and then the next big hitter is the school, about half that, 47.93. So they're the big players, okay? The delta column next to it is really comparing it to the prior year. So I'm not sure we need to do a whole lot with that, but I actually did, because now if you look at the second half, still same with gasoline, the consumption in 2018 was up 10% over, 2017. So now you're getting into, gee, what's going on? When I press it down a little bit, it appears as though the mileage perhaps out of town, driving was a driver for that. So if you look at the departments, it's police, then schools, and then the highway. Again, no surprise there. And as we talked, there's not a whole lot we can do about this cost. Okay. On the diesel side, the highway was up 25% in the second half, which basically was that March storm. The guys must have really been out there chugging away. It was not only snow clearing, but there was road clear, there was tree clearing, all kinds of stuff going on. So that is a good explanation for what was going on there. So anyway, I think to wrap things up, I think we had a pretty good year. We would like to still see some continued improvements. DOER, I think, still thinks that we're on track pretty much for keeping the discipline of our green community, so that's good to hear. I don't know, any other questions?
The schools, as we move forward, they've taken a little different approach on their special needs vans, as I call them, and that's what's kind of tanking up at the highway. They've jobbed that out this past, in 2019, the year we're in now. So as we move forward, we shouldn't be fooled by a reduction in fuel for the schools. And because they jobbed it out.
We're paying for it in other ways.
Right, it's in their budget, so their outside services for buses went up. So our fuel would probably go down.
So we won't see that.
You won't see it for another couple
And
of years.
isn't that the same, Bob, as the school buses themselves? I don't believe.
No.
They don't fuel up there.
No,
either.
these are generally vans.
No, I know, but I'm saying the school buses don't fuel up.
No, they're not a part of this number.
So it's the same story now. The buses are doing kind of the same thing, right?
Well, the buses, they've always jobbed those out. The ones that we've done is the small minivans.
Right.
That's the school that fuels up at the highway barn, and they've jobbed out a fair amount of that. They've taken, I believe, 5 older school buses out of the system, and they jobbed that out to an outside source. Now, they might come back because they got surprised at the cost of doing that. They started it last year, and I guess there was, like anything, there's always escalators. If you read the fine print, I'm sure it's escalators based on fuel costs and things like that. So it should reduce, but for a different reason, not for less fuel being used. It's just the approach.
Well, but I'll look at it closely.
Yes.
And if I don't see a reduction, we'll say, what's going on here? Right?
Yes. And the police, we always have, I don't have mixed emotions. For all of us that live in the town, the police are everywhere.
They are.
I mean, so
That's
they're out
reflected
there.
in the numbers.
There's a minimum of 4 cruisers and almost 5. There's 4 cruisers that do 50,000 miles per year. So we're one of the highest mileage, I'll say citations, people that get stopped. So we're out there, and that translates into fewer breaking and entering. So if we read the police side of the report system, the police do a good job, but it costs you a lot of fuel to do that. I mean, these are well in excess of 200,000 miles a year. So they do a lot of driving.
Is this
There
a-
isn't any of us that don't see them.
Is this a new policy? I mean, that's. it
No,
seems-
no, you
it
really
seems-
can't set-
It seems like it's, the
Well-
last 5 years, the visibility of the police has gone way up.
I'll give you an example, both a pat on the back, but I don't want the older people to be disparaged. The younger officers are out there doing a lot of patrol. You know, an older officer maybe wouldn't be. And we have a lot of new officers, would be kind of my assumption. We don't set how many stops you have to do. We do get a lot of grants, though. So a grant for, say a DUI grant, says you have to stop 4 cars an hour. So you're out there burning through the fuel, stopping a lot of cars. So,
Hope they're stopping them
The-
legitimately.
yeah, they're everywhere, as we know. So let me say this, they are there more on the road than they were 8 years ago, say.
Yeah,
For
at
the
the
same number of
At the
police.
same time, you see them parked a lot in the strategic areas.
They're invisible places, like at the church. in the
Yeah,
corner.
church up there.
Right.
The
We'll
old-
give all the
yeah.
sites.
You know, we know the sites.
Exactly.
There's nothing wrong with that. I like that.
No,
Yeah, not at
no,
all,
and.
not at all.
And, we, you know, there was a great debate just to go to the police station about where to put it. I didn't mind putting it right on the main road, say to the bad guys, there's our police station. And we're out there in the public. We want you to know that we're an active police department, and they really are, with the mileage they put on.
Yeah.
Jim, looking at page 8, I'm just reflecting a little bit, because looking at numbers. In the left side, where you look at the use per square foot, you can look at the heating oil, and of course, the high school is really bad,
Okay, yeah.
right by your thumb.
Right.
And that's the building that is a single-story, big, long, big, flat roof.
Lots of roof area.
Every single room in that building has a roof.
Yeah,
Whereas the best one is the 3-story building at the top, which means only a third of the rooms have
I
a ceiling
think you're right.
exposed to this. And I'm not going anywhere with that, just analyzing it and looking at it.
Yeah.
Well,
Gray's was recently rebuilt.
But that's one story, basically.
It is, but it was rebuilt. It has, probably has a newer roof, an insulating roof on it. Just looking at the,
Right.
Yeah,
but then when you look at the electrical, the middle school, that must be the swimming pool doing that. You come down here.
Right.
The pool isn't at the Grays building.
No, he dropped down. because-
Oh, no, I'm wrong, and you're right. You're
Is
right.
that the great, yes.
I'm wrong, you're right.
No,
So the middle school is a 3-story building.
Correct.
right.
What would cause such
Well,
bad
you know,
electrical
they
performance?
had the theory that there's more motors, there's more controllers, there's more electricity consumption. And someday we'll probably really figure that out. If
the
I
servers
took,
over there are the, on mains?
Servers are over there, they have 90% of the streetlights on the campus hooked into that. So,
That's a separate bill though, I think.
not according to Bob Souza. He said, and we could kind of touch
Yeah.
on that a little bit when we
Okay.
look at the PRISM report, because those, for some reason, they're like 1,000-watt streetlights in those parking lots.
They're not LED?
Oh,
Yeah, no, they're
They're
not.
not?
That,
Oh, my
that's
God.
our change. So we'll touch on that
Yeah.
in,
Okay.
as soon as.
Not
as
to
soon as
digress,
Jim's
but Bob Sousa's gone to Old Colony,
Yeah.
right.
and so there's a new person at the campus.
Yeah, Greg Goodwin, I think his
Goodwin.
name
Goodwin.
is.
Is, and
Yeah.
he's a tremendous guy. I've
Yeah.
known him most of my life.
Yeah, he's been kind of an assistant or a second
Yeah.
guy there.
Yep.
For Bob, and so, yeah.
Thanks for the digression, Jim.
no, I think this is great.
Okay, I'm all set.
Okay, do we need to take a vote to accept the report?
I don't think so.
Necessary?
Probably not. I think it's been accepted by DOER and,
It's just an update.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, I guess hindsight, and maybe we'll be having another meeting in another few months, is that as we drag the schools into it, and Nate's gonna address this, I almost should have thought of having Mr. Goodwin and Ashley Lopes come to the meeting to show all the reportings that you've done. I know you're working a little bit on that
Yeah, I've sat with them
aspect.
independently
Yeah, right.
and walked through
Right,
where we're
but
at.
maybe the next one, maybe we'll have them come.
Yeah, that'd be a bad idea. I did meet with Ashley briefly, went fairly soon to introduce myself, and I kind of showed her a lot of the same
Yeah.
plots. She was quite new at that point, you know, I'm not sure if she fully understood everything we were looking at, but I think was receptive. I couldn't get a sense from that review as to how aggressive she might want to be in terms of making improvements.
Yep.
One of the things I think I'd like to do fairly soon is we should collectively have a discussion with the retiring facilities guy from Old Colony, Tom Rezinowitz, or whatever his name is. Bob is replacing him. He is part of the institutional memory of what we did there. We've cut the energy consumption by half, I think. But I'm probably the only one who was there when we did all that. I mean, the administration's changed, the staff has changed, the school committee has essentially changed. I think it would help us to capture from Tom, because he was involved in all the nuts and bolts, capture from Tom all the things that we did that were really good to do. So we have some suggestions and thoughts and guidance if we're going to try and convince the folks at the regional system to engage in that. I mean, the savings are phenomenal.
Yeah, I know a lot of that was done through performance contracting.
It was absolutely done.
And so if you don't have the capital, I guess it makes a lot of sense. And you know, John and I have discussed that a little bit with the schools, and the schools have looked at modeling Old Colony and said, okay, let's do this. And really what that ends up meaning is you either end up with a fixed or a reduced cost by the energy savings of all this equipment. And either a company like Trane or Siemens will come in and replace all your equipment for free.
And those were the two who bid on.
And then they take all of the federal and state incentives, energy rebates, so on and so forth. And your reduction of energy uses is less than what you're actually realizing because they're absorbing, I mean, nobody does anything for free.
Right.
So they're realizing a good amount of it. But if we can continue to get these DOER grants, and then all of that will come back, and you'll see that in some of these charts.
There's a hidden benefit that doesn't come up too often, but we talk about it, we know about it. When you go through that whole process, you end up with brand-new everything.
Yes.
And all the breakdowns that you used to have to fix and take care of and patch, and you had to find parts that were no longer available, that's all gone, because you have all brand-new.
Now, Nate, I'm sure will speak to it, but if we get $250,000 a year grants on the Lakeville side, which we expect to get, if we could ever get Freetown to be part of the green energy group themselves, they would get another $250,000. So there could be $500,000 worth of grants where you're replacing a lot of things that you maybe have a fair maintenance bill on.
Freetown has money. They have Amazon dollars.
The problem is that the boiler alone is almost $1 million.
Yeah.
So I don't, unless there's some other way to do it, even if you combine those two amounts, you don't get to that one capital item. Now, you probably
But
look
you
at
don't
this
buy it
more closely.
immediately. You have a bond for 17 years or something.
Well, that's
I guess in your presentation, we're getting into your presentation.
That's a good discussion to have, because you gotta look at the return on investment and remember that the fact is these grants are a competitive grant. In more often than not, if the return on investment goes over 10 years, you're not gonna get it. So if you take a boiler replacement and it's a 20-year return on investment, but we can get $500,000 of it, the state counts towards that what the town contribution is. So if we come up with $500,000, you drove down the return on investment from.
Oh, I didn't know that's how they do that calculation.
And we'll go into that a little bit on
on
the charts.
You know what had the fastest return on investment in that project was?
Soda machines.
The soda machines.
I know, because we did one here.
Yeah.
Your motion
Swing
detectors
turns on
on
when
the
you
side.
walk
Like
by.
9 months, 8
Yeah, it
months.
was about what it was.
Right.
It was 8 or 9 months, which was amazing. Had we known that now, or back then when we started this, we
Could
would
have
have
all had
taken.
free soda.
We would have taken, we would have taken the stuff that was right at 10 years and done those projects first instead of the low-hanging fruit. And I'm seeing that now. We've done so many projects. The projects that would have qualified because of percentage-based reductions,
Right.
they don't show the return on investment because we've already done so much.
Yes,
So
that's right.
if we had done the 10-year stuff, the 2-year stuff might have become 4-year, we would have still got them, or the 4-year stuff would have been 8-year. But because we did a lot of 2, 3, 4-year stuff up front,
Yeah.
the 10-year stuff went to 12, and we ended up partially subsidizing it to drive it down and be more competitive.
Right.
And that was the angle that we took at the Assawamsett Elementary School. And so the first page is the 2017 grant round. In the 2017 grant round, what we did is the town actually invested part of a friendly lawsuit with the school district that the Board of Selectmen generously put right back into Assawamsett Elementary School. So we subsidized the 2017 project by $42,290.21. And you'll see that on the town contribution side here.
Right.
So we also were successful in writing a pretty easy grant to Middleborough Gas and Electric. They were offering an $8,000 50% matching grant for any lighting upgrades. So we were able to put those in, $8,000 from Middleborough Gas and Electric. You'll see that in the column right next to approved grant funding. Total project cost for the 2017 grant projects was $297,000, $297,790.21.
Two sevens there, right?
Yeah, there's 2 7s in a row and after 14 hours got me there. But the amazing part of this that I was most impressed with even with our kilowatt rate, we're saving $48,000 a year at that school. So when we look at the grant funding, so the town's investment is paid for in 1 year. The $247,500 put forward to this project by the state is just a portion of what the realized benefit of being a green community is. We're seeing nearly $50,000 a year in savings, and as costs increase, I mean, that number just continues to go year
Right,
after year.
year after year.
And they get
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Now, the Board of Selectmen, the town of Lakeville, never asked to see any of that back from the regional school district. So that goes right back into the educational component to that school, which, I couldn't be more proud of this group,
Yeah.
to make sure that these things are happening, and the selectmen's support to allocate real dollars into making sure we drive down the return on investment to make these projects successful.
Yeah.
So early on, we're looking at the MG&E kilowatt usage bills right now. The school's great with getting them to us. And we're seeing, we're not ready to report on it, but for the last 3 months, we've seen 20 to 25% decrease in the bills. And I think that's fantastic. So we'll fast forward to the next page, which is Apponequet High School. So being that Lakeville's a green community and that we've submitted our annual report and we have reached our 20% overall reduction goal, the Department of Energy allows for us to go into the school district. Had we missed any of those precursors, we wouldn't have been able to apply it to the district. But we met our 20% goal. Now we can put into grants for the school district regardless of Freetown's participation. So we started this process, and I don't know if you remember, but we put into an owner assistance technical grant quite a few years ago now. I think it was 2015, and we did thermal audits on all municipal buildings just to see where potential savings could be. So I assisted the school, and the school did most of it. They applied for this same grant, this assistance grant through Department of Energy. They were successful in getting $12,500 towards this, so they wrote an RFP.
Took some pushing to get them to go for that, but.
It did, and I think
But
there
that's
was some
good.
skepticism at first, and then we started garnering support and momentum as they
Right.
saw that this was real. It
Right.
wasn't just words. So once they started seeing what was going on at Assawamsett and these projects were getting completed, they got excited. And then I think that's great, because we need their support. So they got the $12,500. They wrote an RFP, a request for proposals, for this ASHRAE Level 2 thermal audit. And in that audit was the $12,500, and it identified numerous ECMs. And I can send that report around. It's a large document, so I didn't print it all.
That's a pretty impressive report,
Very.
you know, for the 12.5. I mean, it's probably kind of
It is.
boilerplate for them, but it's pretty complete.
But they were through every single
Yeah.
portion of that building. And if you look at the project narrative, this is part of the grant application, the second page kind of calls out project scope, and it lists all the ECMs that were identified. The ones bold and underlined are the ones that we went for that had the most lucrative return on investment.
Right.
So the scope of the thermal audit was much larger than what you'll see on my table, because all of them weren't included in the request.
Oh, yeah, it was,
It was
Yeah.
comprehensive.
it was, yes.
So on the Aponequid sheet, you'll see, and again, these numbers can be skewed because this is based on 11 cents a
Yeah.
kilowatt. So I've made
Any
this
other town,
argument.
they'd be at 19 cents a kilowatt.
I wanted them to normalize, and I know everything should work in dollars and cents, but what we're trying to do here in the true spirit of being a green community is the reduction of our carbon footprint and reduction of overall usage. So I had asked for them to normalize what a BTU is worth. So when we report an MMBTU, that should be across the Commonwealth, is what is it worth us is
Get that BTU
to
down.
get that BTU
Because
down.
there's also emissions.
Exactly. The unfortunate part, and nothing, I mean, Acushnet is close by, and, they can do a thermal audit, and they can present something, and they can have a 5-year return on investment, or, well, let's say a 6-year return on investment, and be R12. They'd get the job, we wouldn't. Just because they're paying 23 cents a kilowatt. Now, I get it. I love Middleborough G&E. If we get a little less grant funding because of it, that's fine, and they throw money at us left and right to help with this.
But you're right, if you do it on a BTU basis,
really
it
what it
changes
should
the story. Now, did you get into a discussion with anybody on that?
Yeah, I've talked to Seth and Jane
Seth,
both about it.
okay.
Yeah.
And so,
The way the
is
state,
there much they can do with it?
they're starting to look more at it when they go through the competitive grant process.
Okay.
So when they're looking at it, they're like, what did you figure your rates were?
Right.
They can't, the state's looking at dollars and cents. Let's face it, right? They want return on investment. Where can we save towns for the reduction of energy? But the state is starting to look at, DOER anyway, is starting to look at that more from a usage perspective.
Right. Well, one thing I might want to follow up with you, but just while I'm thinking of it, I was contacted by DOER, and I guess some names have been recommended. They're trying to put together basically like a steering committee, board of people. So, and I was asked if I would join, be willing to join the board at DOER. What the heck's the guy's name? I haven't made it, but the first meeting's coming up in a week or two. So I'm sure Seth probably must have put my name in.
Oh, yeah.
And, but that's something that I definitely want to bring up.
Yeah.
As maybe a discussion point, because
Right.
they're going to be talking in general things for the most part. And maybe there's some other communities that might have a similar, although not too many communities are paying the low rates we're paying.
No, and
So-
there's a couple other things that I brought up to Seth too. By being on a muni, we're not able to use vendors. We have to go through
Yeah.
procurement. So, 2015 grant cycle, we bid our project twice because the first attempt, we didn't get a single bidder. I had to reach out and start soliciting energy companies to say, please give Lakeville a shot, for crying out loud. We got this money.
Yeah.
We want to get a couple bidders. And we're lucky we landed with Prism. And I can't say enough about Prism Energy because even, I was going to say being green at the project is kind of like a fun, but they've assisted me in ways that you can't imagine. Questions that I've had, I've reached out to them. Within a day or two, I got an analytical report on what I'm looking for submission purposes, and they've been a great partner through this.
Right.
Just real quickly, back to this. to finish the thought on procurement, munis have to go through procurement, the RFP process. Investor-owned utilities can use their vendors. So, the vendors write up the whole scope of work, they get the project, the grant's awarded in June, they're off and running by July 1.
But if we have to do an RFP, don't you have to have other people bid on it also?
Yeah, that's
or-
exactly, we have to go on
So do you-
by state, we gotta do state bidding on this and follow all procurement laws, when a lot of these investor-owned utilities have certified vendors already pre-approved to do the
So
work.
how were you able to stay with Prism? They just keep coming up and,
I push them to bid every time.
Good.
There's companies that are used to working with investor-owned utilities, and I brought this up to Seth too, is we had a situation, I won't name the other two companies, but we had two other energy-specific companies on the last grant cycle. Prism bid, I think their base bid was like 167. The next one up was 225. The next one up was 340. And they get so used to working through these investor-owned utilities in not being questioned as to what they're charging.
Go big, yeah. Who
They
would
don't
guess?
really care if they get the job or not, so they'll throw a huge number out there. And if they get the job, that's great, and if they don't, they don't. And that's another thing to be said about Prism, is Prism has known that has happened to us on multiple occasions because the bid is public record. Yet they still come back year after year and bid our projects at an ultra-low rate. And I've spoken to Seth about this, and a lot of times they find it hard to believe we're able to get done what we get done for the cost that we do it under. So, again, I've urged, because a lot of towns like Cushing or these other towns, they can pick Rise Energy or Guardian, and they're just their people. They write their reports, they do their quarterlies, they do their annual.
so the
It's
cost
done.
is gonna creep up then.
Exactly. So we do all of this stuff in-house through town assets in volunteerism, and that goes kind of unnoted sometime at a state level. And we're on an every other year grant cycle, when most of these towns that are on investor-owned utility are hitting them every year, and they're not doing a whole lot of work. So I brought that up in anticipation of trying to get on an every other year cycle. We're being real aggressive, but I have the 100% of the school support in administration of the bids. So I'm working with Ashley now. We're looking to try to go out to bid in May in anticipation of the June issuance of the grant.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna have the caveat that, of course, each of these individual ECMs will be bid separately, and the awards will be contingent upon successful grant award. Hopefully to start, and as soon as the kids get out of school, with a September 1 finish date, and we'll be right back here to square one in, December 31st with the annual report and final grant.
So do you alert Prism that something is coming at all, or, I mean? yeah,
Absolutely,
okay.
absolutely, and if it were up to me, I've talked about this to Seth, Muni should have the availability. These companies are all vetted through the state to begin with.
Right.
We should have the opportunity to still pick a company, and just, these numbers all get run through the state, and there's accountability there.
Right.
It would make the process far easier than going through procurement, and John and I have talked about that as well.
I think this is great, but I want to talk at the end of what you're talking about the boiler. Just walk me through that again. About if we have a boiler problem at Gray's, if we do, and that's still to be defined, and it's $1 million nut, but it's really multiple boilers. There's a hot water commercial one that does the school plus the pool, and then there's two other burner systems. So even though it's significant money, it's kind of broken out maybe into thirds, not exactly a third, and a third.
Yeah.
And so we might qualify, and I don't know that the town or the school would mind if you said, Jesus, we get a grant for $250,000. I wouldn't mind, I would not be against presenting at a town floor meeting that we float a bond or something for another $250,000 and knock out a boiler if in fact we needed to do one.
You said Grays. Usually the boiler I refer to is at the high school.
Yeah,
Well-
there's 3 boilers at high school, but there's a new issue going on with.
There's a new issue at the Gray School. Exactly.
fair enough.
No,
It's the same
exactly.
idea,
No,
same general idea.
right. It kind of came out of the woodwork a bit, and maybe it will last a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We would make any proposal, I think, to the school committee, wouldn't we? I think.
Well, yes,
school
they do the
committee-
capital
The
request.
school committee has to be involved. We should
Yes.
have a school committee member here with us.
Well, right, so,
We should have someone on our side.
right, so that's one. Ashley, Mr. Goodwin, who's newly taken Bob's place, Ashley Lopes, who's the new business manager, and then maybe as you said, a school committee person from I think there's 4 on the Lakeville side, if you will. We should probably have one of them attending unless Ashley takes on that role. But the town certainly would support it, I think. I mean, we'd have to propose it, but if you say, listen, if you put in another $250,000, the payback's in less than 10 years.
It's like, we're getting it matched.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So even if it's 50%.
Yeah.
It's.
And
Yeah.
the savings will pay it off in no time.
That's right. So, I mean, it's a pretty good package.
Yeah.
You got the
Yeah.
savings, yeah.
And to Don's point, and that's a good thing, I'm glad you brought that up, because, you know, in the event like the boilers, 20-year return on investment, but if we're only paying a half of it, it's 10 years, and the state's return on investment is 10 years, but they're not seeing the return on investment. So it's really
We're getting their
potentially,
return.
we're getting their return, so it probably drives it to 5 years.
How does the state pay the other half?
Yeah, that's not bad, right?
How's the state paying the other half under what system?
The state pays, so if we can drive down the return on investment, we get it through the grant.
Yes.
And that's where they would be paying it.
Okay,
So,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah, it's through the grant.
it's through the grant.
Okay.
So,
It isn't like a new school where
No.
the state pays half, we pay half.
no,
Yeah, okay.
so real quickly, the projects we identified were ones with shorter term return on investment, stuff that we could be competitive with without any town contributions. Middleborough G&E does have another matching grant of $8,000 this year. We put in for it. I talked to Sandy. She felt as though there's a really good chance that we get that. We're going to be looking at variable frequency devices on heating, hot water pumps, rooftop units, full building weatherization, partial lighting upgrade. And the reason why that went to a partial lighting upgrade is because the full lighting upgrade on the whole school to go to LEDs, I don't have it in front of me, but was somewhere in the vicinity of $180,000. That put us over the maximum allowed grant of $250,000. So we broke that down and brought it to $103,000 worth of lighting, and that was all exterior lighting. And this is that 1,000-watt metal halide piece to about 120-watt LED. So without even seeing the savings numbers, we know that that's 90% reduction.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, I mean, we know that there's gonna be dollars and cents there. It's not smoke and mirrors.
No.
There's a 90% reduction plus they last longer.
And they're free because, right? Yeah,
last forever.
and they last forever.
Well,
So there's no
and
maintenance.
that gives you something to go after the next year, the rest of it.
And that's what we're trying to do. And that's just the parking lot lighting in the wall packs and canopy lights at Aponequid. We'd really like to start going after, like the middle school with the exterior lighting, and you'd see, that's the same deal. It's all 1,000-watt metal halide.
Did you mix some, as you pointed out earlier, if you took all the low-hanging fruit, the payback is pretty quick.
mixed it in
Did
on
you
this.
mix it in? Okay, no, I figured you did. I didn't want to go through that.
Learned by my
No,
hands.
as you pointed out earlier, it's better to mix them. Yes.
So that's about the, where we are with this. And I just wanted to read something real quick. In the project narrative, it's about the 5th paragraph down. It's imperative to note, while the town of Freetown is responsible for 43.62% of the Freetown Lakeville Regional School District budget, the Lakeville Board of Selectmen voted on January 29th, 2019, to dedicate the entire 2019 DOER Green Communities competitive grant request to the school district for energy efficiency improvements at ARHS. This includes committing town resources to submit the grant request and provide grant administration. The school district administration is excited and fully supportive of this initiative, has offered assistance in data collection, procurement, and project management. If successful in this grant application, we anticipate revitalization of Freetown's interest in achieving green communities designation. This would truly provide for meaningful energy reduction on a much larger scale. And the reason why I feel it was important to put that in
That's a great
is
statement.
because we want to make sure that, you know, the town of Lakeville wasn't obligated to do that at the school.
Yeah.
And there's nothing at all coming back to the town on this. It was, we're doing this, we're not going to realize the savings. It takes town resources. We're doing the very best we can. School staff and administration very, very excited about this. And this starts to make it worth it. And we're trying to garner support from some of the green communities clubs at the schools. I had suggested maybe they help out, you get a teacher with some of the green community kids and have them help on the quarterly report writing, have them help on some of the data collection, and really inspire the intent of what we're trying to do here. And I think that should go a long way. And so I just wanted to read that into the minutes just to say that this is what we're trying to do. And I really hope that Freetown, I believe, passed 3 of the 4 criterion. They got stuck on the stretch code. Right now, the stretch code is almost no different at all. And nor will it be in the future. We're at 60% reduction based on 2006 numbers on the same square footage residential home.
And they've really changed the format of reporting.
Yeah.
So
if they could get on board with this, to John's point, $500,000 a year could be going into that school. I mean, that's incredible. And
I'm just wondering if it would help. Do they need, a visit from maybe somebody like you? And I'd be happy to talk with someone about the energy, the data gathering and analysis part of it.
Well, I'm hoping
easier for them?
if we're successful in this grant, the school committee, the administration at the school, this is just going to start being talked about without being pushy, because, it's tough. They got to want to do it. And then I assume that when Freetown decides to become a green community, self-servingly, they're going to want to do what we did, right? And I don't blame them. They're going to want to hit their municipal buildings, and they're going to want to realize the savings. And when those start become less lucrative, they're going to reach out to the schools, and then they're going to see that. So, even myself, I haven't taken my eye off municipal buildings. So in the next grant cycle, if I can dig up $40,000 or $50,000 worth of work we can invest in town-owned buildings, I'm going to do that. But the other 200 can go to the school, and that's if we continue to keep the selectmen's support.
There certainly is that debate. Nate did very well putting that in there, that we'd love Freetown to be a green community. But there certainly was some lengthy discussions about, well, if we're really getting $250,000 worth of grants, why don't we ask Freetown for $250,000 worth of capital improvements? But we kind of know where that would go. So this is probably a better approach for a year or two. Yeah. This is, hop on board.
It's a great gesture. I think it creates some goodwill.
Yes.
And sets the stage for more. I think the school would be more inclined
to help.
To help and maybe push on Freetown, I guess, somehow.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and if you look at the chart, it only showing around $25,000 a year savings. And I shouldn't say only, because it's really not costing the town anything. But the reason that is there's 146,000 kilowatts that are being saved a year. That's a big number. That's a bigger number than what we saw with the $48,000 a year savings at Assawamsett. It's just the 11 cents a kilowatt drives it down so far. It's only the only thing we're really doing to save oil, and to Jim's point, that's the biggest consumer, is we're doing weatherization. We're tightening things up. We're inexpensive, adding insulation, caulking, that kind of stuff. And we're saving not only, but it's 42,050 gallons of number 2 fuel oil. If we can even if maybe Freetown down the road would agree to help subsidize their regular percentage and say, look, this is what we're doing next year. We're gonna go after one of the 3 boilers, and it's gonna cost $300,000, but we might only get, 175 from the state because of the return on investment. Town of Lakeville is willing to throw 50 at it. Can you throw 50 at it? And now we get for $50,000, we got a $300,000 boiler. So, maybe that's, we can phase that, and I think John wanted to talk about that, is 3 boilers at Aponequid. So the number to change all 3 boilers are $1 million, or $980,000.
Right.
But we can change those one at a time, because they're not failed. Okay, so they're operating, they're just not efficient.
See, I didn't, okay, so.
And so,
Right, it isn't one big system.
no, it's 3 separate
The
systems.
more we dig into it, the more we find out.
So if we went in there to be proactive and said, look, we don't necessarily need a boiler replacement, but this is what our goal is over the next 3 to 5 years, we're gonna tackle one a year, and then at the end of 5 years, you got $1 million worth of boilers, and it costs the town $150,000.
Are they the same model boiler?
Yeah, and I'll send that report around, because they've identified
It's really smarter
current,
to do them all together, so they're all the same.
it wouldn't, and that goes to speak with the performance contract, and that's the one really good thing about entering into an agreement with a Trane or a Siemens or somebody like that. If we're not able to go through, the grant process, yeah, that would be a good option. I think that once we change one boiler out, if we can really do it in 3 to 5 years, I think we can spec out the same boiler for part 2 or in part 3. Maybe it changes a little bit, but it's gonna be substantially the same type of equipment. Just my thoughts on it, but I think that taking a shot at it makes sense to realize the cost
It's the
savings.
absolute right thing to do, yeah.
Right. So when you do the submission, are you submitting these to the state, plus your narrative and lots of other stuff?
There's lots of
Okay,
stuff.
okay.
Jim was very, very
Yeah.
helpful, because you gotta remember, the campus wasn't part of our official
Right.
baseline
Yeah.
or our official
Right.
energy reduction plan.
But we decided early
That we were
to
gonna
track
track that
that
data.
and.
Right,
Yeah.
which is great, you have all that historical data.
So I'll send everyone out the whole package, which was the ASHRAE energy audit, the grant narrative, the historic data, our 20% kind of letter of acknowledgement from the state that allowed us to get into this. We had some other stuff. I had Prism do a revised lighting list for exterior only, because we had the reduced
good.
scope.
Yeah.
So last minute, they whipped together a reduced scope energy list, so I could put it together with the cost savings in the project cost. So that was just another thing that they helped us with. But it was, I don't know, probably 50 or 60
Yeah,
pages.
and I had
altogether.
contacted, you suggested I call someone, because I still want to be able to try to get a better way of tracking the electrical separately. And I called a contact person that you gave me a name on, I
Yeah,
forget.
I mean, it was Doug McLeod.
Doug McLeod, yeah.
So what?
I don't think I've heard back, but I
noted that in my MGE bill, that they're changing to all electronic meters with
Yep.
remote access.
Yep.
So I wonder if you could arrange remote access to their meters.
well, see, the meters that I'm getting the specificity for the buildings on are so-called memo meters. They're not revenue meters. Now, it doesn't mean they couldn't do it, but I wouldn't be surprised if they came back and said, well, I can't do it on those meters, but.
I mean,
Anything,
But would they-
anything behind their meters on that system, our system here, doesn't matter. We can track, with or without their permission. I'm not saying that we wouldn't include them, but the reality is that we're tracking for the purposes of kilowatt hours. They have, the revenue meters take on a whole new level of requirements and abilities and tracking, and it is incredibly precise.
Yeah, but that's just not gonna help me with the separate schools.
I understand that. What I'm getting at is MG&E we don't need MG&E meters.
No, I wasn't
You know,
suggesting.
I'm
I
just saying
think-
that we can meter it ourselves.
Yeah, I'm just concerned that, I think what I'd like to try to get happen is somehow in this, I think between $5,000 and $10,000 would be able to outfit, maybe not even that much.
So if you look
Pick up.
at that, I did that.
Oh,
So
okay.
because I didn't have the information back yet, and I know we had talked about it.
Right.
Under project management, we were allowed $10,000, up to $10,000 or 10% of the project, whichever is less.
There it is.
So I just dumped in 10 grand for project management. And we're allowed to do that because we're allowed to pay town employees in kind, or we're allowed to get resources. I didn't expect any of that. I just expected if we had the $10,000 there, we could continue to look at this, and then I can ask for a project change, which I've done in the past. Project change, because it would definitely be relevant to management.
Right.
Data collection is
Exactly.
management. So if we can do Wi-Fi metering, to Rick's point, after we get by the municipal meter, do anything we want. So each individual school, before your distribution, we can just tie in and we can have it report to whoever we want it to report to, and say, this is right, I would
Because
say.
we've been doing it for 2 or 3 years now,
Yeah.
but I'm not getting them reports in the same
Day or two
time.
off, and you're trying to normalize it.
Yeah, exactly,
It's
so,
And far more
I mean,
granular.
frankly, as we get closer to the, we're becoming asymptotic about what we can actually achieve for, for dollars and what have you. Your data acquisition has to become a lot more granular.
yeah.
And you need to be able to pull that telemetry to be able to really hone in on where can you tweak it.
That's right. Or
Okay, so-
where has it gone south on you for some reason?
Right.
Something has lost the control
Now-
or something, yeah.
And then you also have to think about where is it all going to be stored and who's going to be responsible for it.
Yeah, it's not a lot of data, I mean,
Well, it isn't now. But each one of these things that come, that you buy new and you install, comes with a whole new level of capability to track, control remotely and otherwise. Things that.
I'm not talking about managing, some
I
systems
understand
will write an invoice for you, no.
But in the old days,
Yeah.
you had boilers that gave you meters, or gauges, and that's how you got your telemetry.
Yeah.
Today, they've got the electronics already built in, that all you need is a connection
Right,
to be able to pull all the information and then some.
okay.
Connection's
So
wireless.
when you spend
Yeah, wireless.
$103,000 on lighting upgrades,
It all comes
do you
from
have a
wires
bill
and
that
relay.
matches that?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I have
So it's
backup
already
data.
backed up,
Yeah.
okay, no.
Yeah.
So what you folks have done is,
I don't understand what was your question again?
well, no, the $103,000.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that there's a specific meter that's dedicated to that and not buried in the kilowatt usage of the electric bill, so you can find out how you did against the $103,000.
So the
But
103 is
that's-
project cost.
Yeah,
you
that's the
want-
project cost,
that's
right, but
kind
you
of-
have a meter that goes
You
against that.
you want
Yeah.
a
But
meter
that's-
on the light system.
Yeah, yeah.
No, we don't
They-
have a meter on the light.
But that's what you
Kind of,
want.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the savings that you're gonna have. We can extrapolate it by going from 1,000 watts to 100 watts.
Yeah, and that's,
No,
and
but
that's,
but it'd be good to show it.
Yeah.
it is good to show it. I just, it'd be very difficult to sub-meter each ECM.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Right.
No, but they're
But
probably
we-
all in the same
So-
circuit.
So just the building is sub-metered,
Yeah,
and
Right.
that's a manual read.
Yeah.
And I have to go through a conversion and,
yeah.
okay, so
Yeah.
we need to get out of that.
You folks have done so much,
It's
Detail.
provided great information, though.
right,
That
Yeah.
manual metering doesn't bother me at all.
right. Right. You've done such detail on this. What, somehow it's like, I want to convey this as best we can to the school committee
Yep.
and to the town of Freetown, and, certainly to the collectors of the information, which would be, I'll say Ashley Lopes and ever that gets delegated, so they can see the amount of time and effort that you folks have put in on this. I mean, it's a massive
I've-
amount.
I've
And I
sat-
know they're getting excited about it.
I've sat with Rick, Ashley, and Bob and gone over this whole thing.
Yeah.
I've submitted all of the grant
Yeah.
information to
Okay.
them to see what
Yeah.
they're looking at. Last week, when I started hearing about Greg Goodwin, that kind of
Yeah.
excited me because I got a good
Yeah.
working relationship with Greg.
Yeah, I haven't met Greg, but
I'll make sure I make
yeah.
that introduction, but I made sure to get him a copy of it because Bob will be gone when this
Yeah.
project starts.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure Greg understood
Yeah.
what the project scope was, because that was part of this sort of agreement, is that, gaining entry to the school and making sure that everything's scheduled. They're gonna do that. They're gonna do a majority of it. Of course, most of it's with permits. I gotta do inspections. I'm gonna help manage it. But I really, they're gonna carry the lion's share, so to speak, so.
This is such a massive investment on your folks. I say your folks' time because you're really putting the effort in, that we want to really make sure they're on board. So the next, my mistake is the next meeting, we would certainly want to involve at least one school committee member from Lakeville, if not invite them all.
Yeah.
And certainly Mr. Goodwin, and certainly Ashley, and never to not invite Rick Maderos, the superintendent, but not to come to every meeting, but to really get them to
Yeah.
get the same enthusiasm, which I think you've done.
Yeah.
You've done that.
I know that the grant awards are typically the first or second week of June, and,
Okay.
nervously awaiting that.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more that goes on with this, and Jim, kind of smirking at you, because we're gonna have to start data input and all this into Energy Insight. So now the campus has become part of this green community piece.
I've already set that
Yeah.
up. And
So
I've been
you're
putting
already
data
there.
in. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that.
It's
but I
already
mean,
there.
That's now, but that's gonna be another big piece to
And
this.
I'm glad, see, I'm glad that I started that.
Yes, me too.
And also, hearing your story and all the work you've done to set it up so we'll have to be doing it for real.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, and it's part of our real raw data.
And the only thing is, we're gonna have to flip a switch on it. So now it's gonna count.
It's gonna
There's a
count.
little toggle.
Right.
Right
It's
now,
gonna
it's not
count.
counting, now it's gonna count. Yes, I don't
Counts
know
July
what
1,
that's gonna do for
hopefully.
the basis, and I'm not worried about it, I'm really not, 'cause
I'm a
we're
little
doing the right
That's the good
thing.
news.
That's right.
We've already reached our 20%.
There you go, thank God.
So, I mean, that's just kind of some of the things that we've been working towards, and
This is
I wouldn't
incredible.
mind waiting to see the grant award, send it out to this group,
Yes.
and then just say, if for some reason, I mean, we have I think there's 250 communities now that are green community, and they have a similar pot of money. So, our experience has been really, really good. But I mean, if they come back and we got 50,000 or 100,000, it still was free, and that's good. I anticipate more. I'm hoping for more, but I'd like to kind of, digest that here before, get the school over here. So,
Right.
I mean, what?
Right, let's get the grant.
yeah, get the grant.
Get the
and-
grant.
I always say get the grant, and why don't we just have a meeting to discuss the grant?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Right.
I mean, I can show some, but I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on that. It's how the grant works, how we'll get the data,
Yep.
and how we'll go forward, so.
And then
That would be
we'll
great.
invite them to a meeting, and this is what we've got, and this is how we're gonna implement it, and by that point, we'll have bids out, we'll be able to award the bids, it'll be good, hopefully.
No?
A lot of work if it's
I
not
think-
good.
I think you can just
But
see
it's
the
a-
massive
yeah.
amount of work that you've
Yeah,
accomplished.
and
It's a great effort.
other towns have somebody that is dedicated to just that kind of stuff. which
Yeah,
is-
I've been real fortunate, the last couple of cycles here, Jim, you've helped out a tremendous amount, Lorraine
Well,
did
it's a
an
team effort.
outstanding work. Tracy from the Selectman's Office does a lot of the submissions. It's definitely a group effort, and now that the school's on board and they're gonna be doing the RFP, assisting us with the
Good.
RFP, I think it's good. It's a
Great.
lot
Let's see.
of hands.
Let's see
Yeah.
what you get in the June cycle.
Yep,
It's
Yeah.
exciting.
that's all I really have on that.
That's it?
That was a lot. I was stressed out. My throat was getting a little
6 months
dry.
worth of work summarized in 35 minutes.
Excellent, thank you so much. Okay, next is scheduling the next meeting.
Do we wait till after the grant? Or do we need to do something before?
I think within the next 3 to 4 weeks, I'll have the exact day of the grant award. It's usually the first to second week of June, so I mean, I would say that if we can give it a couple of weeks and probably say, I would tentatively plan towards the end of June.
Well, do you want to try to pick an end of June day now?
Yeah, it'll be by the
let's
end
do
of
that.
June, the
Yeah.
grant will be done.
So, on a Thursday, the 27th is the last Thursday, the 20th?
Third Thursday doesn't work for me.
Right,
That's
okay.
zoning board.
So 27th?
27th
Of June?
Yeah.
of June.
So you can't
work?
go anywhere on July 4th, that's coming up right after that.
It's fine with me. We got the grandkids. It's just, yeah.
7 o'clock, or did you want to push for 6?
I'm
Will everybody-
very flexible, I can be here anytime.
Seven works for me. I mean, I get out of work at 4:30-ish,
Okay.
so.
7's okay.
7, okay. Very good. And, let me just make sure I get it all. Okay. Next would be new business. Is there any new business?
We sort
The-
of covered a lot of new business in a sense as we've gone along, but
I don't want to bore you with solar and nuclear and stuff, but you've all seen what happened on Crooked Lane. You know, put up a significant solar farm. And so, Middleborough Gas and Electric pays a little more than 6 cents a kilowatt hour. They charge us, say, 12. And National Grid and those folks, they probably pay the same 6, and they charge everyone 22 and 24 cents.
That's correct.
So, thank God for Middleborough Gas and Electric. But what happens with the solar, at least on a short-term basis, is the credits that the government gives is 20 cents a kilowatt hour. So instead of paying the 6 cents, you're paying 20 cents on top of that. You're paying more than 300% the base rate in just fictitious subsidies. So
And we're all paying that through.
we're all, and so what's gonna happen is the Middleborough gas companies of the world and everyone else, as they
Munich.
continue to close coal plants, and which Middleborough Gas and Electric wasn't basically on that, they do hydro and nuclear.
Right.
But obviously, there's a move to continue closing nuclear, although there's another move to say that's our only hope is to create nuclear. So anyways, it's a significant cost that we're all gonna pay someday for solar. I'm not saying don't do it, but it's not like instead of 6 cents, they pay 9 cents. Instead of 6 cents, it's plus 20 cents on top of that. It's a gigantic amount of money. And it's no different than the electric cars. Getting a $7,500 credit that goes in half when you get to 200,000 cars, and then it goes away after that, another 100,000 or 200,000 more cars.
It's funny you
Goes
mentioned,
away.
funny you mentioned the cars. Well, I was at MG&E office today, and they have a wonderful publication listing all the currently available electric vehicles, including an electric pickup, if it's interested in. But they give the prices, but they don't mention the incentives, which of course, you look at the price, you go, whoa, but then you get $7,000 or something. But again, we're paying.
You're paying for it.
Tax
Now,
dollars.
it's not to say don't do it.
Don't do it, right.
But the
Yeah.
subsidies really surprised me, not of the car subsidies.
Yeah.
That was always well published, that only
Yeah.
Tesla's the only one that makes that far and away. But the subsidies of the government paying 20 cents a kilowatt hour, I almost fell off my chair. I says, well, maybe they're giving them another 6 cents. Not so, 20 cents.
I mentioned that, I mentioned it a few years ago when the folks here.
Yeah.
Right, you were saying that,
questioning
yeah,
it.
yeah.
I said, the the whole system was designed so that, there was no way they were going to compete with what we had.
It had to
The
be
only way the
subsidized.
government had to try to make something happen so that you could look like you're being competitive, which meant they had to feed it.
Right.
And the government doesn't, they may print the money, but they don't make the money.
Right,
They
right.
take our money.
My meaning
And
isn't,
redistribute it.
my meaning isn't piston engines and oil, but the subsidies are pretty significant.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that's all.
Is MG&E hooked into wind power at all of any kind, do we know?
No, not at this point in time. It's pretty much hydro, which obviously the hydro's coming from Canada.
Yep.
And there's the big debate about how to get it through Maine and
Right.
settling up with there, which that would help everyone out in the New England, Massachusetts area. But let the people from Maine figure out how they get that through. And no one wants natural gas, they all want it, but they don't want the pipes to run through their towns. My wife recently worked on a project, I think it was we'll call it the Tennessee Pipeline, which was to run the natural gas pipelines from the oil fields to New England and to the country. And basically, if you took the high tension wires that have that breadth of 300 feet through the woods, they were gonna run the gas lines right underneath that, which everyone goes, that's great, that's great, that's great, until the depot ends up in Lexington, Mass. And then no one wants the depot and distribution and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, how much time I spent trying to get Columbia Gas to do natural gas at the schools,
Come down the street.
coming down the streets, coming from Chase Road, coming from wherever. And it just kind of falls upon deaf ears, but someday it may come.
Well, they have a legitimate problem in that their supply
Yep,
is limited. And in the
Yep.
winter,
yep,
the residentials take absolute control.
I think they
And-
spent
And industry has to take a second.
Right. The project that my wife worked on, but it wasn't her getting paid, it was a $2 million government project. And I think it just kind of got mothballed because no one wants those depots to be near their town.
Well,
Never mind that it's in the next
Yeah,
town.
MG&E just, they have no more customers for gas.
Right, part of that is that Columbia Gas, if you took by the train station, it already goes down the road.
Yeah.
So they can cut into the houses that are right on the road.
Yeah.
But Columbia Gas, through this last fiasco, can't run new pipes. They've like pulled their license until they figure out the future of installations and who's gonna be doing it. Is it National Grid? I forget who's helping them up there. And so until they sort that out, there's no one right now earmarked about how to run new natural gas pipes. The ones that are already there, you cut the road and you go into the house, wherever it
Yeah.
is, if it's Captain's Way or Anaconda, wherever it runs, that kind of thing. But I think Nate runs into some of that, the potential of that, of people they build it for natural gas, but they've got to run it on propane until they're able to get more lines. That isn't true.
We had a lot of conversions.
Yeah.
People built the homes, heating system, cooktops, everything,
For natural.
fireplaces, and they said, oh, man, they're not bringing gas in. And, LeBaron, some of LeBaron was like that. They were a little slow, the Riverside project, same way. So they had to convert everything just to reconvert after they would finally get in. I mean, they had a closing, and they're like, look, can we put a 300-gallon tank out there and get your propane? We'll pay for it all. And that's how it
Yeah.
should
Do we have
go.
any other business to conduct?
Nope. Nope, adjourned.
I don't think so.
That's what I
All
like about
business.
Don.
All right.
He's got to get up early.
A working guy.
4 o'clock.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right. Adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman does not need a motion to adjourn. He can declare adjournment.
Getty.